Imagine two students sitting in the same English class. Let's call them Ria and Kareem.
Okay, I'm picturing them.
So Ria raises her hand to answer a question. She says, yesterday I went to the market.
Right. Common mistake.
Yeah, and the teacher gently corrects her. The teacher says, yesterday I went to the market. Ria smiles, she nods, and she repeats the correct sentence.
She just accepts the feedback.
Exactly. She writes it down in her notebook, and that evening she practiced using past tense verbs for like 10 minutes.
Just a quick review.
Yep. But then Kareem also makes the exact same mistake. But when the teacher corrects him, Kareem's face turns completely red. He looks down.
Oh, no. We've all been there.
We really have. He's sitting there thinking, I am so stupid. I will never learn English properly. What is the point?
He's internalizing it.
Completely. He stays quiet for the rest of the class. He stops raising his hand entirely. And, week by week, he just speaks less and less.
Which is heartbreaking, really.
It is. Because jump forward 1 year later, and Ria's out there having basic conversations with native speakers. She's watching English movies without subtitles. She's writing emails to her international colleagues.
And Kareem.
Kareem still struggles with simple sentences.
Yeah.
He avoids speaking English whenever he possibly can. So what actually made the difference here?
That's the big question.
Right. It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't talent. It wasn't even the amount of time they sat there studying. The difference was just how they thought about learning itself.
Yeah, the framework they were using.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ria had a growth mindset. Kareem had a fixed mindset. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here for this one.
If you are listening right now and you've ever felt like your stomach just dropped when a native speaker asked you a question.
Oh, that sudden panic.
Yes. Or if you've been studying for literal years, but you still freeze up at a coffee shop, this conversation is specifically for you.
It really is, because we are digging into decades of psychological research today.
And we are applying it directly to the incredibly messy, humbling, and frankly rewarding process of learning the English language.
The contrast between those two students, Ria and Kareem, it really gets to the biological root of how we process failure.
How so? Like on a biological level?
Well, think about it. It was the same room, the same teacher, the exact same grammatical error, yet two completely different neurological responses just unfolded.
Right. Ria learns and Kareem shuts down.
Exactly. Because when we talk about mindsets, and this goes back to Dr. Carol Dweck's work at Stanford, we are talking about this invisible cognitive framework through which you view your own capacity to change.
An invisible framework.
Yeah. A fixed mindset essentially dictates that your abilities are completely static. You look in the mirror and you just decide, well, I'm simply not a language person.
Which is such a common thing to hear. People say it all the time.
All the time. And in that framework, every single mistake you make is not just, a simple error. It's an exposure of a permanent limitation.
Wow. So it feels like this massive indictment of your actual intelligence.
Totally. It attacks your identity.
I mean, if you're listening to this right now on your commute, or maybe while washing the dishes, think about the last time you stumbled over a sentence in front of a fluent speaker.
Just remember that feeling.
Your heart probably started racing. Your palms might have started sweating. You probably wanted the floor to just open up and swallow you whole.
That fight or flight response?
Yes.
Yeah.
But why? Why does learning a language trigger such a visceral, like almost life or death physical reaction compared to learning, I don't know, how to use a new spreadsheet software?
That is such a crucial distinction, because learning a spreadsheet, that's an external skill. It's outside of you.
Right. No one's judging your soul based on Excel.
Exactly. But language is intrinsically tied to our social survival. It is the primary vehicle through which we project our identity.
Our competence, our personality.
All of it.
Yeah.
So when you strip that vehicle away, or when you're suddenly forced to communicate with the vocabulary of a toddler.
Which is terrifying for an adult.
Right. The brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, it just goes into absolute overdrive. It literally interprets social embarrassment as a physical threat to your survival.
So you're suddenly completely vulnerable. You feel like you're walking into a room without any armor on.
Yes. You know you are going to mispronounce words in front of total strangers.
Yeah.
You're going to completely blank on basic grammar rules during high-stakes meetings.
Oh, the worst timing possible.
Always. And you will sit in conversations where the words just wash over you and you understand absolutely nothing. That is just the baseline reality of the journey.
But people with a growth mindset, they don't magically enjoy this vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
Like Ria wasn't necessarily having fun being corrected.
No, not at all. They just view the discomfort as a necessary mechanical step in the learning process. They don't take it personally.
They treat it like a muscle.
Exactly. A muscle that only strengthens through micro tears, through deliberate effort and failure and adaptation.
Okay, but I have to push back on society a bit here.
Go for it.
Because I think our culture actually makes adopting this growth mindset incredibly difficult. We have this really pervasive obsession with natural talent.
Oh, the myth of the prodigy.
Yes, we love that cinematic story of the person who casually moves to Paris for a summer and they come back speaking flawless, poetic French, and they never seemingly opened a single textbook.
Right, they just soaked it up by drinking espresso.
Exactly. We praise that effortlessness so much, but that praise secretly reinforces the fixed mindset for everyone else.
Because it implies that trying is failing.
Yes. It broadcasts this message that if you have to work hard, if you're sweating and stumbling and, making flashcards late at night, then you lack the magic spark.
We penalize the messy reality of actual learning by worshiping this illusion of effortless mastery.
Which is so toxic for language learners.
It really is. To survive language acquisition, you have to stop acting like someone who's desperately trying to prove they're already an expert.
Yeah, start acting like what?
Like a scientist running experiments.
Oh, I like that. A scientist. Which brings us to the first massive psychological shift we need to talk about. Let's look back at Kareem for a second.
Poor Kareem.
He really let a single, incredibly common grammar mistake completely silence him. His amygdala basically hijacked his brain, like you mentioned earlier, and he just shut down.
It's a very human reaction.
So how do we actually override that biology? Because we have to redefine mistakes entirely.
We have to move them from being these huge emotional disasters to just being neutral data points.
Neutral data points. That sounds like a huge rewiring of your relationship with failure.
It's fundamental. Most adult learners treat a language mistake the exact same way they treat a physical injury.
Like it physically hurts.
Right. It's painful. It means something has gone terribly wrong, and it must be avoided at all costs.
So when they stumble over a sentence, they just start apologizing excessively.
Oh, constantly. They say, I am so sorry. My English is terrible. Please forgive me.
And then they lie in bed that night, replaying that one tiny error on an endless, agonizing loop in their head.
At 2 a.m., just staring at the ceiling.
We've all been there. But highly fluent speakers, specifically the ones who actually achieved fluency as adults, through deliberate practice, they do something different.
They strip the emotion entirely away from the error.
They treat it like a neutral piece of information. Let's ground this in a real-world scenario so people can picture it. Think about Maria.
Okay, Maria.
She's a native Spanish speaker who recently moved to Canada, and she's sitting in this glass-walled boardroom.
High-pressure environment.
Very. It's a quarterly planning meeting. The stakes feel incredibly high to her. She's translating her thoughts from Spanish to English in real time, managing this massive cognitive load.
Which is exhausting on its own.
Totally.
Yeah.
So she speaks up and she says, I'm here since 5 years.
Ah.
And a colleague sitting across the table smiles and just gently replies, oh, you mean you've been here for 5 years?
Which is a classic translation error. Because in Spanish, you would use the present tense for that exact construction.
Right. It makes perfect logical sense in her mother tongue. Now, if Maria is operating in a fixed mindset, what happens?
Her cortisol spikes immediately.
The inner critic just starts screaming at her.
She starts backpedaling, feeling this burning shame. And her brain's affective filter, which is that psychological wall that goes up when we feel anxious, it just slams shut.
So for the rest of that entire meeting, she remains silent. She hides. She might even try to find a reason to call in sick for the next meeting.
Because the boardroom is now associated with trauma.
Exactly. But let's rewind. What if we apply the growth mindset to that identical moment? How does her response change?
It changes the entire trajectory of her language journey. She hears the correction from her colleague, but instead of taking it as this personal attack on her competence, she categorizes it as raw data.
Just a data point.
Right. She thinks, okay, have been is used for duration. I need to remember that.
She might even make a mental note or physically write it down in her planner right there at the table.
Yeah, she doesn't hide it. And then the following week, she intentionally uses that exact phrase.
She treats the world as her own private, free tutoring service, which is brilliant.
It really is the ultimate hack.
But I have to challenge this a bit, because linguists frequently talk about the danger of something called fossilization. Right.
Yes, fossilization is a big topic.
So if I just run around embracing all my mistakes, constantly telling myself it's all just data, don't I risk permanently wiring bad grammar into my brain?
That's a very fair fear.
Like if I keep saying, I am here since 5 years and nobody bothers to correct me, won't that become a fossilized habit that I could literally never break? How do we balance this fearless communication with actually learning correct syntax?
Okay, so the distinction between a developmental error and a fossilized error is super crucial here.
Walk us through that.
Fossilization usually happens when a learner reaches a level of communicative competence where they are mostly understood by others.
So they're getting by.
Right. They get by, so they stop paying active attention to the language structure. They just go on autopilot.
So it's a lack of attention, not a lack of fear.
Exactly. The growth mindset does not mean you ignore your mistakes. It means you hyper-focus on them, but without the emotional baggage.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You avoid fossilization precisely through active noticing.
Yes. It is the difference between blindly repeating a mistake and objectively analyzing it.
So how do we actually do that? Because I imagine trying to remember every mistake is impossible.
It is. So to actively map the terrain and prevent fossilization, there is a very specific mechanical practice you can implement.
Okay, I love actionable advice. What is it?
It is called the error journal. It utilizes the psychological principles of active recall and spaced repetition.
Walk us through how a listener can literally start an error journal today.
Sure. You dedicate a physical notebook or even just a specific note file on your phone.
Something easy to access.
Very easy. And every single time you make a mistake, whether someone corrects you or you simply catch yourself mid-sentence, you write it down.
But just the correct version, right?
No, actually, you do not just write the correct version. You write the incorrect version that you actually said first.
Oh, really? Why?
To map the gap. Then, right below it, you write the corrected version.
Okay, wrong version, then right version.
And finally, you write out one brand new original example sentence using the correct form.
So you're applying the rule immediately.
Exactly. And then you review this journal at the end of every week.
I see how that changes the dynamic entirely. It takes the sting out of the mistake.
It almost gamifies it.
Yeah. You stop dreading errors because you actually need to collect them to fill out your journal for the week.
It forces your brain to engage in what we call metalinguistic awareness. You are stepping outside of the conversation to look down at the machinery of the language.
It's like you're a mechanic popping the hood.
Spot on. And over time, your error journal becomes this tangible proof that you are in the arena pushing your boundaries.
But, once you start collecting mistakes as valuable data, you encounter a pretty terrifying reality.
What's that?
You have to actually put yourself in situations where you might make those mistakes. You have to intentionally leave the shallow end of the pool.
Which nobody wants to do.
Nobody. And this forces you right into what is arguably the most agonizing phase of the entire language journey.
The intermediate plateau?
Yes. Or what linguists sometimes call the silent period.
Oh, the intermediate plateau is where the vast majority of adult learners just give up entirely.
Because it's so frustrating. It's this stage where your passive comprehension is miles ahead of your active output.
It's that maddening in-between stage. Your mind is advanced.
Right. If you were speaking your native language, you would sound nuanced, persuasive, highly intelligent.
But when you try to push those complex thoughts out in English, the words just get stuck.
They emerge so slowly. The sentence structure feels incredibly clunky. You feel like you are presenting yourself to the world as a less intelligent version of who you actually are.
Which triggers that social threat we talked about earlier.
Completely. But why does this happen? Why is the gap so wide between what we understand and what we can say?
There is actually a fascinating neurological reason for this gap. Language comprehension and language production are handled by entirely different networks in the brain.
Really? They aren't the same system?
Not at all. Comprehension primarily relies on Wernicke's area, which is located in the temporal lobe. It is essentially a passive recognition system.
Okay, Wernicke's is for listening and reading.
Right. But speaking requires Broca's area, located in the frontal lobe. This area coordinates the complex motor functions required to actually physically produce speech.
It's the engine room.
Yes. So your Wernicke's area can process and understand a complex English podcast effortlessly. But your Broca's area hasn't built the neural pathways to generate those same sentences yet.
So your mind literally knows what to do, but the physical machinery of your brain just hasn't caught up.
Precisely.
That explains why it is so deeply, deeply frustrating. Let's talk about Ahmed to illustrate this.
Good example. Let's look at Ahmed.
So Ahmed is an Egyptian engineer. He works for a multinational firm. His English is solidly intermediate.
He probably reads technical manuals fine.
Oh, he writes excellent technical emails. But one day, his manager tells him he needs to present his upcoming quarterly project to the international executive team.
Oh, wow.
Out loud, in English, to the executives.
A nightmare scenario for someone stuck on the plateau.
An utter nightmare. Ahmed knows that under pressure, his broca's area is going to misfire. He might blank out on a crucial technical term while a dozen executives just stare at him.
The stress levels would be off the charts.
So if Ahmed leans into his fixed mindset here, what is his move?
He protects his ego. He finds a way out.
Right. He asks a colleague whose English is flawless to deliver the presentation instead. And he tells himself a little lie. He says, I will do it next year when my English is completely fluent.
And we know that magical state of fluency never actually arrives.
Why not?
Because he is actively avoiding the specific stressor required to build those neural pathways in Broca's area.
He's avoiding the gym, basically.
Exactly. But what if Ahmed decides to take the growth mindset approach?
Well, he prepares with intense dedication. He rehearses the presentation 20 times.
Probably records himself.
He does. He records himself on his phone and forces himself to watch the uncomfortable playback. He presents it to his family in his living room.
It's grueling work.
And on the day of the meeting, his heart is hammering. He actually makes several mistakes. He stumbles over his pronunciation on a complex slide.
It's not a fairy tale ending where he's suddenly perfect.
Exactly. It's messy.
Yeah.
But he finishes. He delivers the data. The executives understand his project, and they even ask him genuine follow-up questions.
That is a massive victory.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what Ahmed experienced there, that hammering heart, that intense mental friction, that was not a warning siren telling him he wasn't ready.
Not at all. That discomfort is the literal physical sensation of cognitive growth happening in real time.
It's like the burn you feel when working out.
Exactly. We accept this concept completely in physical fitness. If you go to the gym and lift weights, your muscles burn. They sustain micro tears.
You don't drop the weight and say, oh no, my body's broken.
Right. You understand that the discomfort is the mechanism of growth. In language acquisition, the cognitive load you feel when translating under pressure is the exact equivalent of that muscle burn.
No discomfort, no fluency.
That's the mantra. No discomfort, no fluency.
Okay, I hear that, but let's be realistic about human endurance for a second.
Fair enough.
How do we actively seek out this discomfort without completely flooding our nervous system and just burning out?
It's a balance.
Because we cannot all volunteer to present to the board of directors every single week. If the cognitive load is too high, the effective filter slams shut, and we don't learn anything anyway.
You raise a very vital point about managing cognitive load. The goal is not trauma.
Thank goodness.
The goal is controlled exposure. The actionable strategy is to deliberately schedule one slightly uncomfortable English activity into your calendar every single week.
Treat it like a doctor's appointment.
Treat it like a non-negotiable medical appointment.
Give me some concrete examples of what controlled exposure looks like.
It needs to be an activity that pushes you just past your current comfort zone. So if you always use the self-checkout at the grocery store to avoid speaking,
Which so many people do.
your uncomfortable activity is going to a human cashier and asking them how their day is going.
Just a 10-second interaction.
Exactly. It could be calling a customer service hotline to ask a question instead of using the automated online chat.
Oh, the phone is terrifying for language learners.
It's excellent practice because there are no visual cues. Or it could be logging into an online gaming forum and using voice chat for 10 minutes.
So the specific activity doesn't matter.
The specific activity is completely irrelevant. The criteria for success is simply that it makes you slightly nervous.
You want to feel the butterflies.
That flutter in your stomach is the biological indicator that you are operating at the very edge of your capability.
You are chasing the flutter. I love that framing. And that ties perfectly into a massive realization about Ahmed's presentation earlier.
How so?
Well, Ahmed survived that boardroom because his ultimate objective was to share his engineering data. His objective was not to sound like a professional, flawless audiobook narrator.
Ah, yes. The myth of flawlessness.
Exactly. This requires a profound shift in how we set our goals, moving away from this myth of flawlessness and towards the actual reality of communication.
If you survey adult learners and ask them what their ultimate goal is, a staggering majority will say the same thing.
What do they say?
They say, I want to speak perfect English.
Perfect English.
They envision a future where they have zero accent, zero hesitation, and absolutely bulletproof grammar.
It is such a seductive fantasy.
It is deeply seductive, but it is deeply counterproductive. It is basically the fixed mindset disguised as ambition.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Disguised as ambition.
Because it implies that true fluency is synonymous with total flawlessness. But if we actually analyze the speech patterns of native speakers, the reality is entirely different.
Native speakers are remarkably imperfect.
Incredibly imperfect.
Just eavesdrop on a conversation at any coffee shop. Native speakers swallow their consonants. They use incorrect grammar all the time.
They really do.
Like the phrase between you and I.
Yeah.
That is grammatically incorrect. It should be between you and me. Yet millions of native English speakers use it daily.
They lose their train of thought. They use filler words like, they rely on localized slang that violates every rule in the textbook.
And they do not care.
Because their primary cognitive objective is not passing a syntax exam.
What is it then?
Their objective is transferring an abstract idea from their brain into the listener's brain. They are prioritizing communicative competence over linguistic competence.
This reminds me so much of Yuki. She is a marketing professional from Japan.
Tell me about Yuki.
She is a brilliant strategist. And she spent her first 2 years working in an English-speaking office in London as a silent observer.
2 years. Just silent.
Mostly, yeah. She was terrified that her heavy Japanese accent would cause her colleagues to view her as unintelligent.
That fear of judgment again.
Exactly. So she developed this exhausting coping mechanism. She would sit in the meeting, nodding aggressively, taking meticulous notes, and then spend an hour afterward crafting a perfectly edited email to share the marketing ideas she should have just spoken out loud.
That is an incredibly common strategy, but it burns massive amounts of working memory.
Yes. Think about the cognitive load there. If 90% of Yuki's working memory is dedicated to monitoring her own pronunciation and suppressing her accent.
Then she only has 10% left to actually analyze the marketing data being discussed.
Exactly. It's completely unsustainable.
Okay.
Then a shift happens. Yuki gets a mentor.
Okay.
A senior executive who immigrated from South Korea 2 decades prior. And this mentor gives Yuki a totally paradigm-shifting piece of advice.
What does she tell her?
She says, Yuki, I have been working in this country for 20 years. I still have a Korean accent. Do you know what my accent tells people in this boardroom? It tells them that I possess the cognitive flexibility to operate in more than one language. It is proof of my capability. It is a badge of honor, not a stain to be scrubbed away.
Wow. That is a profound reframing of identity.
Right. The accent is not a failure to assimilate. It is literal evidence of bilingualism.
It's evidence of a wider worldview.
It changed everything for Yuki. She realized she was prioritizing this mask of perfection over her own brilliant strategic ideas.
She was hiding her light under a bushel.
Totally. So she started speaking up with the accent, with the occasional hesitation. And the result was exactly what you would expect.
No one cared about the accent.
No one cared. Her colleagues were simply thrilled to finally have access to her insights. She thrived once she dropped the immense psychological burden of trying to sound like a native speaker.
Yuki's story highlights the sheer resilience of human communication. Human beings are exceptional pattern recognizers.
Meaning usually survives broken grammar, doesn't it?
Almost always. If you use the wrong verb tense, but the context of the conversation is clear, the listener's brain will automatically autocorrect the sentence and understand your intent.
It fills in the blanks.
Exactly. The goal must shift from, I want to construct perfect sentences, to, I want to be understood and I want to connect.
So what is the actionable step for the listener who is currently holding themselves back like Yuki was?
The next time you find yourself remaining silent in a group because you haven't mentally drafted and proofread the perfect sentence in your head,
Which takes way too long anyway.
I challenge you to just throw the imperfect words out there. Speak before you are ready.
Just jump in.
Watch what happens. In almost every case, the conversation will continue seamlessly. Furthermore, you need to actively build a toolkit of phrases that help you navigate breakdowns in communication.
You mean like learning the language of asking for help?
Yes. Phrases like, how do you say? Or, could you repeat that a bit slower? Or even, I am losing my train of thought. Give me a second.
Those are so helpful. But I think fixed mindset learners view those phrases as waving a white flag of defeat.
They do. They think using them exposes their incompetence to the room.
But they don't.
No. Growth mindset learners recognize that these phrases are the actual everyday mechanical tools used by fluent speakers to keep the machinery of conversation running smoothly.
Even native speakers use them.
Constantly. They're strategies of fluency, not signs of weakness.
Okay, but dropping the need for perfection and communicating imperfectly guarantees one thing.
Awkwardness.
Yes, you are going to encounter some incredibly awkward moments.
Yeah.
You will misunderstand people, you will use the wrong word, and create total confusion.
It's inevitable.
Learning how to carry those awkward moments with pride is a skill in itself. We need to talk about the concept of Kintsugi and using failure as literal fuel.
Kintsugi is such a beautiful analogy for this. It's the traditional Japanese art of repairing broken pottery.
Right, but the philosophy behind it is what makes it so relevant to our discussion today.
How so?
Well, when a bowl breaks, the artisan does not use clear glue to try and hide the cracks and pretend the breakage never happened.
They don't try to make it look brand new.
Exactly. Instead, they use lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum to bond the pieces back together. The philosophy asserts that the breakage and the repair are part of the object's rich history.
The flaws are highlighted.
They become the most beautiful and valuable part of the piece.
Applying this to language learning is incredibly powerful. Every single fluent speaker walking the earth today has a hidden collection of humiliating facepalm language stories.
Every single.
It is a mandatory requirement for fluency, not a sign that you are doing it wrong. Your failures, those moments where you wanted to disappear, those are the gold lines in your language journey.
Can you share an example of what that looks like in practice? How do we use the gold?
Sure, let's look at Priya.
Okay, tell me about Priya.
Priya moved from India to the UK for her graduate studies. She considers herself highly fluent. She attended English medium schools her whole life.
So she's confident.
Very. During her first week in London, she walks into a corner shop and asks the person behind the counter where she can find the biscuits.
The biscuit confusion.
Right. Because in India, as in the US, a biscuit is a sweet cookie.
But in the UK, the terminology is entirely different.
Exactly. The shopkeeper points her to an aisle. Priya looks at the shelves, sees nothing resembling a cookie, and gets utterly confused.
And the shopkeeper can probably tell she's confused.
Oh, yeah. And the line behind her starts backing up. It gets incredibly awkward.
That pressure cooker feeling.
Priya is so mortified by this sudden, unexpected loss of competence that she just grabs some random items, pays, rushes back to her flat, and literally cries.
Oh, Priya.
She sits there thinking, I have spoken English my entire life, and I cannot even successfully buy a snack. I am an absolute fraud.
That feeling of being a fraud imposter syndrome is deeply tied to the fixed mindset.
It really is. The fixed mindset response to that trauma is complete withdrawal. She might decide to only ever order her groceries online for the rest of her time in the UK, just to avoid a repeat of that shame.
Right, but let's say Priya taps into her growth mindset.
Okay, so she takes a breath. She lets herself have a laugh at the sheer absurdity of the situation.
It is kind of funny in hindsight.
It is. And she pulls out her phone. She creates a new note and titles it British English versus Indian English.
I love this.
She types her first entry, biscuit equals cookie. Over the next few weeks, she treats her linguistic confusion like a scavenger hunt.
She turns it into a game.
She learns that chips in the UK are fries and crisps are what she calls chips. She maps it all out. Within a few months, this document grows to nearly 100 words.
She completely transforms her initial humiliation into an area of deep, specialized expertise.
Exactly. When other international students arrive at her university and inevitably get confused, who do they go to?
Priya.
Priya. She becomes the oracle of British grocery shopping.
What is so structurally brilliant about Priya's approach is her method of cognitive behavioral review.
She didn't just passively laugh it off, she systematized her failure.
Right. When an awkward moment happens, listeners can use a 3-step reframing process based on what Priya did.
What are the 3 steps?
First, ask yourself objectively, what exactly went wrong? Detach the emotion. In Priya's case, it was just a regional vocabulary mismatch.
Simple as that.
Second, what specific knowledge would make this work better next time? She'd researched the correct localized terms.
And the 3rd step?
Third, how can I build a system to practice this? For Priya, it was building and constantly referencing her master translation document.
You are taking the raw emotion out of the failure and mining it for structural gold. That's Kintsugi.
But, this brings us to a massive psychological hurdle.
There's always another hurdle.
Always. What happens when you do all of this? You are tracking your errors. You are leaning into the uncomfortable silent periods. You are painting your broken grammar with gold. and you still feel like you are totally hopelessly stuck.
The dreaded plateau.
You feel like you haven't improved in months. We really need to unpack the reality of invisible growth and the nonlinear nature of language acquisition.
This specific phenomenon derails so many incredibly dedicated learners. They put in the daily hours, but the progress does not feel tangible.
Why is that? Why does it feel so slow?
Because our educational system has conditioned us with subjects like mathematics. If you sit down and study algebra for 2 hours, you can point to a new equation you understand.
The progress is immediate.
It's immediate, linear, and easily measurable on a test. But language acquisition defies this linear logic entirely.
It is maddening. You can study vocabulary flashcards for an hour a day for a month, and you still freeze up and forget the word for napkin when the waiter asks you a question.
Because progress in language is fundamentally nonlinear. You might grind through grammar workbooks for 6 weeks and feel absolutely zero improvement in your conversational fluidity.
Nothing. Zero.
And then, out of nowhere, on a random Tuesday, a complex conditional sentence effortlessly tumbles out of your mouth.
It feels like magic when it happens.
You're watching a movie and suddenly realize you haven't looked at the subtitles for the last 10 minutes. A grammar structure that used to feel like a complex math problem suddenly just sounds right.
Everyone waits for that click. But why does the click take so agonizingly long? What is actually happening in the brain during those weeks where you feel stuck?
Linguists and neuroscientists refer to this as the incubation period. This aligns closely with Stephen Krashen's theories on language acquisition.
How does the incubation period work?
Think of a seed planted in the soil. For weeks, you water the dirt and see absolutely nothing happening on the surface. You might conclude the seed is dead.
But underneath.
Beneath the soil, roots are aggressively expanding, securing nutrients, and building a massive foundation. In your brain, when you are constantly absorbing language input, listening to podcasts, reading articles, your neural pathways are forming new connections.
Your brain is working overtime.
It is running statistical pattern matching algorithms behind the scenes.
And from a neurological standpoint, this involves myelin, right?
Yes, exactly. When you first learn a new grammar rule, the neural pathway is like a bare wire. The electrical signal travels slowly.
So it takes effort to recall.
Right. But every time you are exposed to that rule in context, your brain wraps that neural pathway in a fatty substance called myelin.
Like insulation on a wire.
Precisely. Myelin acts as insulation, allowing the signal to travel faster and faster. During the incubation period, your brain is busy myelinating these pathways.
So the growth is happening.
The growth is massive, but it is entirely invisible to your conscious mind until the myelination reaches a critical threshold. That is when you experience the sudden click.
That brings us to Carlos. Carlos is a quintessential example of this frustration.
Oh, Carlos hit the wall hard.
He really did. He had been studying English relentlessly for 2 solid years. He did everything right. He used the smartphone apps. He went to evening conversation classes. He digested hours of YouTube tutorials. He bought the heavy textbooks.
A model student.
But around month 8, Carlos hits a massive wall. He feels just as lost in spontaneous conversations as he did 4 months prior. His listening comprehension feels completely frozen.
He's in the deep incubation period.
But he doesn't know that. He is so demoralized, he sits down with his teacher and says, "I think I am done. I have peaked. This is as good as my brain gets."
An incredibly dangerous moment. He's comparing his current invisible procedural progress to his own impossibly high expectations.
Luckily, his teacher understands the biology of the incubation period. The teacher gives Carlos a very strange assignment.
What did they have him do?
He tells Carlos to go home, set up his phone, and record a video of himself just talking to the camera for 5 minutes about his weekend.
Okay, a speaking sample.
Then, the teacher tells him to dig up a voice recording Carlos had submitted for a class assignment 6 months ago and listen to them back to back.
The ultimate reality check.
Carlos does it, and he is absolutely floored. Hearing his 6-month-old self was a shock to his system.
How bad was it?
The old Carlos was agonizingly slow. He was stumbling over the most basic sentence structures, pausing for agonizingly long seconds just to remember the word for kitchen, massively mispronouncing common vocabulary.
And the new video.
Then he listens to the video he just recorded that afternoon. The current Carlos sounds fluid, confident, natural. The difference was night and day. He literally told his teacher he barely recognized the old recording.
Carlos had fallen into a universal cognitive trap.
What trap is that?
He was constantly measuring his daily progress against the ultimate distant summit of the mountain, which for him was native-like fluency.
Which is so far away.
When you stare only at the peak, it always looks like you haven't moved an inch. But when his teacher forced him to turn around and look down the valley where he started, the sheer altitude he had gained was undeniable.
So how do we operationalize this? The actionable advice here is to systematically document your English.
Yes. Build your own time machine.
Set a recurring calendar reminder once a month to sit down and record a 2-minute video of yourself speaking on any random topic. Talk about what you ate for breakfast, review a movie you just saw, anything.
Just get it on tape.
Save the file. Do not watch it. Then 3 months later, watch that older video. That contrast will be the most motivating, undeniable proof of your myelination that you can possibly experience.
I would add another vital practice here regarding how we interact with our dopamine systems through goal setting.
Oh, dopamine is so important here. Let's talk about goal setting.
Because progress is invisible during the incubation period, you need to completely abandon outcome-based goals.
Wait, abandon them completely. Break down the difference between outcome-based and process-based goals for us.
Sure. An outcome goal is saying, I want to be fluent enough to pass the C1 certification exam in 3 months. Or, I want to have a flawless 10-minute conversation with my neighbor next week.
Why are those bad?
Because you cannot control the incubation period of your brain. You cannot force myelination to happen on a specific timeline.
So you set yourself up for failure.
Exactly. Setting a rigid outcome goal is a recipe for dopamine crashes and extreme frustration.
Wow.
Instead, you must set process goals.
Focusing entirely on the system.
Yes. A process goal is, I will listen to 30 minutes of an English podcast every morning while I commute. Or, I will write 3 sentences in my error journal every Tuesday night.
You control those actions.
You have 100% control over the process. Your dopamine hit comes from ticking the box that you completed the action, not from achieving an arbitrary level of fluency.
And if you consistently execute the process...
The outcome is mathematically inevitable.
Okay, Carlos proved that to stay motivated, sometimes you have to look backward to see how far you have climbed.
Yeah.
But if you want to keep moving forward at a rapid, aggressive pace, you need to be very careful about who you are standing next to.
Oh, this is crucial. The environment.
This brings us to the wrong team rule and why your brain requires you to actively seek out higher levels of challenge.
There is a famous saying in the world of professional athletics that translates perfectly to cognitive development.
What's the saying?
If you are the best player on the team, you are on the wrong team.
Because you aren't being pushed. You are just coasting on the skills you already have.
Exactly. Let me frame it through the lens of psychology. Lev Vygotsky, a pioneering psychologist, developed the concept of the zone of proximal development.
The ZPD. Break that down.
The idea is that true learning only happens in the space just beyond what you can do independently. If you walk into a room and you are always the most fluent English speaker present, your brain is entirely comfortable.
It's not working hard.
Right. You are merely retrieving the vocabulary you already possess. You are not stretching. Fixed mindset learners adore this comfort zone.
They naturally gravitate toward other non-native speakers who share their exact level of proficiency because it feels safe.
Or they subconsciously avoid environments where native speakers are chatting rapidly because the speed and complex vocabulary make them feel inadequate.
But the growth mindset learner knows they need to play up a division. Let's look at Fatima.
Let's talk about Fatima.
Fatima had achieved a very solid intermediate level of English back in her home country. Then she moves to Australia for a new corporate job.
Big move.
Human nature takes over, and she quickly builds a social circle with other Arabic speakers from her region within the company.
Very natural to seek out the familiar.
Totally. They speak English together sometimes, but it is safe. It is a shared level of proficiency. They understand each other's specific accents and translation quirks perfectly.
But what happens to her English?
Well, after 6 months in Australia, Fatima has a sobering realization. Her English hasn't improved at all. She has stagnated.
She was operating entirely outside of her zone of proximal development. She was the best or equal player on her linguistic team.
Exactly. Yeah. Then her company organizes a mandatory 3-day team-building retreat, and Fatima gets randomly assigned to share a cabin and a project group with 4 colleagues who are all native English speakers.
Oh, talk about jumping into the deep end.
Right. For 3 consecutive days, she is plunged into total, unrelenting English immersion. We are talking rapid-fire dinner conversations, fast-paced cultural jokes she barely catches, heavy local Australian accents, intense overlapping debates over team exercises.
Her brain must have been on fire.
By the end of the 3 days, Fatima is physically and mentally exhausted to her absolute core.
That intense mental exhaustion is a fascinating biological response to cognitive load. When Fatima was in that environment, her brain was burning immense calories.
Just to keep up.
She was constantly context switching, trying to infer meaning from body language when she missed a vocabulary word, and mapping new phonetic sounds on the fly. Her brain was working overtime to bridge the gap between her current ability and the environment's demands.
But the aftermath of that exhaustion is where the actual cognitive leap happens.
What happened after the retreat?
Fatima gets home. She sleeps for literally 14 hours, and she wakes up feeling a fundamental shift. She survived the deep end.
She proved she could do it.
She didn't just survive. She realizes in hindsight that she managed to laugh at a few of the jokes. She managed to tell a halting but perfectly understandable story about her childhood during a dinner.
Those are huge milestones.
She even got into a passionate, fast-paced argument about a project strategy. And while her grammar wasn't perfect, she held her ground and her team listened to her. The realization that she could swim in those deep waters.
And how did that change in self-perception alter her actual daily behavior back at the office?
When she goes back on Monday, she breaks her 6-month routine. Instead of migrating to her comfort group in the cafeteria, she deliberately pulls up a chair at the table with her native English-speaking colleagues.
She chose the harder path.
She subjects herself to that higher level, high cognitive load environment every single day. And the result, her English proficiency absolutely skyrockets in a matter of weeks. She achieves more tangible growth than she had in the previous 6 months combined.
Because being slightly out of your depth, treading water where your toes just barely miss the bottom, forces the brain to adapt rapidly.
So what's the actionable step here for the listener?
The actionable step is simple but deeply intimidating. You must identify one person or one specific group whose English proficiency is significantly higher than yours.
Where do you find them?
It could be a hired conversation tutor, a native-speaking friend, or joining a local hobby group like a running club or a board game cafe where English is the primary language. Commit to spending just 30 minutes a week in that environment.
And expect to be exhausted. Expect the headache. The discomfort is the evidence of the workout.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered some incredible structural strategies today. We talk about effective filters, error journals, scheduling discomfort to build Broca's area, dropping the mask of perfect working memory, the Kintsugi reframing method, trusting myelination, and finding a harder team to trigger the zone of proximal development.
It's a massive toolkit.
It is, but here is the danger. You can map out this entire strategy, accept your mistakes, push your boundaries, and your brain will still try to trick you into quitting.
Oh, the brain loves the path of least resistance.
It will throw up massive psychological roadblocks. Let's dismantle the 4 most common mindset traps that pull learners back into the safety of the fixed mindset.
These traps are incredibly pervasive because they feel like objective scientific truth to the person experiencing them.
Let's look at trap number 1. I am simply too old to learn English properly.
This is perhaps the most universally accepted fixed mindset belief in the world. And from a neurological standpoint, it is a massive oversimplification that borders on myth.
We really need to unpack this. Because the conventional wisdom is that after age 12, your brain's language center just solidifies like concrete, and you are doomed to struggle forever.
It is entirely true that children acquire language differently than adults. Their brains possess a high degree of phonetic plasticity.
Meaning they pick up accents easily.
Right. They absorb sounds with a sponge-like quality, which is why a 6-year-old can move to a new country and pick up a flawless local accent in a year.
But adults have advantages too, right?
Massive overlapping cognitive advantages that children simply do not have. First, adults have massive, complex conceptual frameworks already established in their native language.
Give me an example of that.
Well, a child has to learn the concept of a mortgage or jealousy while simultaneously learning the word. An adult already understands the deep nuance of jealousy. They just need to map a new English label onto a pre-existing concept.
Oh, that is a massive shortcut.
It is. Second, adults possess metalinguistic awareness.
Break that down for us. What is metalinguistic awareness?
It is the ability to look down at language from above and see the moving parts.
Like we talked about with the error journal.
Exactly. A child just absorbs grammar blindly. An adult can actively analyze syntax, use mnemonic devices for memory retention, deliberately cross-reference grammar rules, and intentionally seek out specific resources to fix a weak point.
Adults can strategize their learning.
Right. And finally, adults possess deep intrinsic motivation. A child learns because they are immersed in a school. An adult learns because they want to negotiate a better salary, or read international literature, or speak to their grandchild.
The why is so much stronger.
Research shows that while adults might not easily achieve a flawless native accent, robust functional fluency, the ability to articulate complex, nuanced ideas in any context is absolutely achievable at literally any stage of life. Neuroplasticity does not stop at 30.
So to escape that trap, we need to stop saying, I am too old, and reframe it to, adults learn differently, not worse.
Exactly. Differently, not worse.
If you need proof, go onto YouTube and find videos of people who achieved incredible fluency in their 50s, 60s, or 70s. They are everywhere. That brings us to trap number 2. I just don't have a natural talent for languages.
The illusion of effortless talent.
When a learner is struggling through a grammar workbook, they often point to a friend or a colleague who seems to just pick up languages like they're collecting seashells on a beach.
They look at that person and conclude, they have the language gene and I do not. Therefore, my struggle is proof of my inability.
What is that observer actually missing in that comparison?
They are completely missing the neurochemistry of joy. The quote-unquote effortless learner is usually putting in a staggering number of hours of exposure, but they are doing it joyfully.
So it doesn't look like work.
Right. They are obsessed with British rock music, so they spend hours reading lyrics and analyzing slang. They love Hollywood cinema, so they binge-watch movies on weekends. They make friends on international gaming servers and chat for hours.
Because it feels like entertainment, it doesn't look like studying to the outside observer.
And here is the biological mechanism. When you enjoy an activity, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine significantly enhances memory consolidation.
So because they genuinely enjoy it, their brain actually retains the vocabulary better.
Yes, it creates a virtuous cycle. The enjoyment leads to more exposure, the dopamine enhances retention, the rapid progress makes the activity even more enjoyable, which leads to even more exposure.
What looks like innate genetic talent is very often just the byproduct of building a learning environment around pleasure rather than academic punishment.
Spot on.
So the escape hatch for trap number 2 is to stop looking at other people's perceived talent and start auditing your own routine. Ask yourself, how can I make this fun?
If you hate your grammar textbooks, close them.
Go read comic books in English. Watch reality TV. Follow English-speaking chefs on Instagram. Build your exposure around your actual genuine interests, and you might find that the quote-unquote talent magically appears.
That brings us to trap number 3. This is the heavy one.
What is it?
If I make a mistake, people will think I am unintelligent.
Oh, this is the single biggest psychological barrier for adult learners. Adults are accustomed to navigating the world as competent, respected individuals in their native language.
Stripping that confidence away feels like inviting harsh judgment. It triggers what psychologists call the spotlight effect.
Which is what, exactly?
It's the cognitive bias, where we believe everyone is paying much closer attention to our flaws than they actually are. We feel like there's a literal spotlight on us when we mispronounce a word.
I want to offer a passionate reframe for this, speaking directly to you, the listener. If you are terrified of sounding stupid, hear this. Attempting to speak a second language at any level of proficiency is a profound, undeniable demonstration of intelligence, period.
It truly is.
Every single time you open your mouth and push through the immense cognitive friction of communicating in a language that is not your mother tongue, you are performing a complex neurological feat that most of the people in the room cannot do.
If you were speaking English to a native speaker who only speaks English,
you are doing all of the heavy lifting. You are translating, you are adapting, you are stretching across the aisle to make connection possible. You deserve immense credit, respect, and awe, not judgment.
and the reality of social dynamics entirely supports this. The vast majority of native speakers are far more patient, helpful, and quietly impressed than the learner's anxiety allows them to believe.
They aren't judging you.
The harsh, mocking judgment they fear is almost entirely a phantom manufactured by their own fixed mindset amygdala response.
So next time your heart races before you speak, tell yourself, I am doing something remarkable that most people here cannot do, and then speak.
Beautifully said.
Finally, trap number 4. I need to understand everything perfectly before I can start speaking.
This trap treats language like a university history course. The learner thinks, I will memorize all the vocabulary flashcards, I will pass the written grammar exam, and then eventually, once I have all the knowledge, I will apply it in the real world.
It is like trying to learn how to ride a bicycle by reading the technical manual.
That's a perfect analogy.
You can study the physics of balance, you can memorize the exact gear ratios, you can pass a multiple choice test on how the braking system works, but the absolute second you sit on that seat and lift your feet off the pavement.
You are going to fall over.
Because reading about balance is declarative memory knowing a fact. Feeling balanced is procedural memory knowing how to perform an action. Language is exactly the same.
Academic study provides the declarative raw building blocks, the vocabulary definitions, the basic structural rules. But speaking is what converts those blocks into procedural memory.
Speaking is the mortar that holds the bricks together.
You cannot become fluent by watching the game from the sidelines. You develop fluency strictly through the messy, unscripted act of real-time use.
The escape rule here is simple. I will start speaking before I feel ready. Because the feeling of being ready never actually arrives before the action. Confidence is not the prerequisite for speaking. Confidence is the reward you get after you survive speaking.
I love that. Confidence is the reward.
Okay. We have dismantled the traps. We understand the deep neurology and psychology at play. Let's bring it all home, the daily practice.
Let's get practical.
How do we practically weave this cognitive restructuring into our everyday lives? Because listening to a deep dive doesn't instantly rewire your neural pathways.
No, rewiring those pathways requires consistent, deliberate practice. Here is a practical 5-step guide you can implement starting today to maintain a growth mindset.
Let's hear step 1.
Number 1, you must actively rewrite your inner dialogue. You have to catch the fixed mindset whispers in your head in real time.
When you catch them, what do?
When you hear your inner voice say, I cannot understand this movie, or I will never be able to pronounce this word, you must actively intervene.
And this is where my absolute favorite word in the English language comes into play, the word yet.
The psychological power of yet is monumental. It alters your self-schema. You simply append it to the end of your negative statements.
Give me some examples.
I cannot understand this movie yet. I don't know how to use the present perfect tense yet. That one tiny 3-letter word takes a statement of permanent, fixed failure and transforms it into a statement of future potential.
It tells your brain that the learning process is ongoing.
Exactly. Step 2, celebrate effort, not just outcomes. We are so culturally conditioned to only celebrate the A+ on the final test.
But what if the real neurological victory was studying your error journal for 20 minutes when you had a terrible headache and just wanted to go to sleep?
What if the victory was raising your hand in the meeting, even if the sentence came out garbled?
Acknowledge the grit. Those unglamorous, frustrating moments of high cognitive load are the actual bricks building your fluency. Give yourself credit for the sweat.
Step 3 is crucial for long-term survival. Find a growth mindset community. We are deeply social creatures, and the mindsets of the people around us are highly contagious.
If you were in a study group where everyone constantly complains about how impossible English is and where people secretly mock each other for mispronunciations,
you will absorb that fixed mindset. You must actively seek out a community, whether that is a local language exchange meetup, an online Discord server, or a specialized class where mistakes are treated with humor.
where people are intensely curious and where effort is celebrated collectively. Surround yourself with people who cheer when you stumble, because they know stumbling means you are moving forward.
Step 4, learn about the science of language acquisition. We talked today about Wernicke's and Broca's areas, the incubation period, myelination, and the affective filter.
Why is knowing the science helpful?
When you understand that these frustrating plateaus are well-documented, normal, biological phases of learning, you stop taking them personally.
You stop thinking my brain is breaking and start thinking, my brain is simply myelinating right now.
And finally, step 5, continuously revisit your intrinsic motivation, your why. The growth mindset is ultimately fueled by a genuine, burning desire to connect, to understand, and to grow.
Because language learning is a multi-year marathon, and there will be miles where you feel utterly exhausted. When that happens, you must return to the initial spark.
Why did you start this deeply vulnerable journey?
Was it to finally be able to talk deeply with your English-speaking grandchild? Was it to confidently lead international business negotiations and secure a better life for your family? Was it to backpack across the world without fear? Or maybe just to finally read your favorite author in their original words?
Whatever that why is, you have to keep it vividly in front of you. Let that deep personal reason pull you forward when the grammar exercises feel pointless.
Which brings us to the ultimate reality of this journey, the long game. Here's the secret that no one tells you when you first crack open an English textbook.
Even after you achieve that mythical state of fluency, you will never, ever stop learning.
That sounds exhausting on the surface, but it is actually incredibly freeing. Fluency isn't a finish line you cross where you suddenly receive a certificate of perfection and your brain just stops working.
Language is a living, breathing, constantly evolving organism. New slang is invented every single day. Old words take on new cultural meanings.
Even native speakers constantly run into words they have never seen before. They misunderstand jokes. They mangle their sentences when they're tired. No human being on the planet has ever mastered the entirety of the English language.
Fluency, therefore, is not a final destination. It is a mode of travel. It is moving through the world with an insatiable curiosity, a persistent spirit, a genuine humor regarding your own inevitable blunders, and a deep delight in your own incremental progress.
The most impressive, magnetic, fluent English speakers you will ever meet, the ones whose communication feels so authentic and effortless, they did not get there through a genetic lottery.
They got there because, at some point in their lives, they made a conscious decision. They decided to be lifelong learners.
They decided that every awkward interaction was just a puzzle to solve. They decided that every single mistake was an instructive guide. Every new vocabulary word was a tiny adventure.
That orientation toward the world, that courageous, curious, resilient posture, that is the very definition of the growth mindset. And the beauty of it is that this mindset is not locked away behind a paywall or a genetic barrier.
It is available to you, completely free of charge, starting right now in this very moment. Let's close the loop and go back to the classroom where we started this entire conversation.
We left Kareem sitting in silence.
His face red, his amygdala firing, shrinking away from the challenge, letting one single grammar mistake dictate his entire trajectory. But Kareem's story does not have to end there.
Because beliefs are not permanent. Neural pathways can be rewired. People change their mindsets every single day.
It is not easy, of course. It requires confronting deep-seated insecurities and consciously choosing a harder, braver path. But it is entirely possible. The evidence of people making this leap surrounds you.
The absolute best time to develop a growth mindset about your English journey was on day one. But the second best time, without a doubt, the second best time is today.
So we want to leave you with something actionable, not just philosophy, but actual procedural practice. I am issuing a direct challenge to you, the listener.
Take the challenge.
Go out today and make one mistake in English. Seriously. Do it on purpose if you have to, just to break the ice. Speak up in a meeting where you normally sit quietly and take notes. Ask a question that you fear might sound a little silly.
Try to use that complex vocabulary word you learned yesterday, even if you're not entirely sure how to pronounce it.
Write an email and hit send without running it through a grammar checker 5 times. And when that inevitable imperfection happens, when the grammar breaks or the word eludes you, do not shrink. Do not apologize.
I want you to smile.
Because that mistake is not proof that you are failing. That mistake is absolute, undeniable proof that you are doing the work. You are in the arena. Your brain is growing.
You're myelinating.
Exactly. If this deep dive changed how you think about learning, if it sparked something in you, please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel so we can keep bringing you insights like this.
Keep making those mistakes.
Keep painting them with gold, and we will see you on the next deep dive.